I used to work for an American architecture practice, and I traveled for a senior leaders away day in Mexico. Come on, sit on Mummy's lap. For a senior leaders away day in Mexico for a client presentation in Dubai, which was a rather complex feat of traveling, including 3 transfers, quite a lot of time zones. And my brain wasn't really doing very well in terms of computing with 45 hours worth of traveling. So halfway through a stopover in Dallas, an immigration official clearly decided he didn't like the look of me, or probably really didn't like the look of my place of birth in my passport. And I stupidly asked him whether there were any issues. And he fixed me with this fairly beady stare and actually said, sweetheart, I really wouldn't touch that. He didn't actually say that. He said, we don't really want people like you in the country. And anyone... Sweetie pie, why don't you sit on my lap? Sit on my lap. No? Okay. Well, why don't you go to daddy, sweetheart?
Sorry.
Right, I'm really sorry.
You're right, Sherin. We can hear you.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry about the fun and games in the background. My son has lost one of his favourite books. So
Okay.
I'm going to continue if you guys are happy with that.
I certainly am. I don't know if I speak on behalf of everyone, but I think everyone empathises and understands. So I hope your son has found his book. And if you're ready, do carry on. It's absolutely fine.
I will do. Thank you very much.
And they're missing some. I don't know why.
We don't have the whole set. We don't have the whole set. Right. Okay. So I was just telling you, he fixed me with the beady stare, a bit like the beady stare my son was probably fixing me at the time, and actually turned around and said to me, you know, we really don't want people like you in our country. And that was quite telling for me. And to be fair, it hasn't been just the Americans. So quite often when I go when I've been on holiday, coming back into the country, although understandably it hasn't happened that often recently, I travel with my very British husband and my son that you've been hearing in the background, and they get waved through customs, and I am actually held back, and I get asked why I've left the country, what I've been doing, why I've come back. You know, anybody would think I was probably part of the axis of evil. So I would say there's probably a lot to do, and even if we always want to be ourselves, there are sometimes things that are stopping us. But to quote from one of my favourite books again, listen, I don't like to preach, but here's some advice. You'll meet a lot of jerks in your life. If they hurt you, remember it's because they're stupid. Don't react to their cruelty. There's nothing worse than bitterness and revenge. Keep your dignity and be true to yourself. This is where, for me, inclusion comes in and how important it is to be yourself. And I come from a background of what my husband calls scary women, although clearly I don't scare my son very much. And one of the things that I've always been told is don't get mad, get me even. But I wanted to talk to you about some of the ways that I've at least tried to be true to myself. So the first thing is about networking and getting and letting people to get to know you on your own terms. So I must be one of the very few brides that back in 2005 asked my dressmaker to actually make a little pocket for my business my business cards. And my dressmaker was so traumatized, clearly, by what I'd asked after that dress. She decided to have a complete change in career. Hopefully it wasn't completely to do with me. But more sensibly, for me, it's always been thinking about who I need to know, how I come across, where to meet them, what they can do for me, but also knowing me not as a fake person, but who I really am, so that I can leverage that as much as possible. The second for me would be about the profile, but again, I go back to profile on your own terms. For me, it's always helped actually being 5 foot born in a different country and having a bit of a hat fetish, although you can't see my hats now. But it's really also for me about being memorable and not being shy about being memorable. I work very much in a male-dominated industry in the Ministry of Defence, and you'll be surprised at how often you actually stand out when you can't remember the legion of faces in all those grey suits around you. And that can be a really good thing, and I think should be embraced a lot more. The next thing is about the skills and showing people what you are really made of beyond that facade. I would say I personally went to the dark side fairly early, and my master's in property development in planning, when I did it in 2000, was met with quite a lot of horror by my architect friends and also my tutors. But it really taught me to understand my clients in a very, very different way than if I just stuck to my tracing paper and pens, which wasn't really true to entirely everything that I was. And it opened up other career paths for me. It also let me escape what I would call the boredom of doing lots of door schedules, which you inevitably have to do as a junior architect, and brick course detailing. And for me, it's never too late to learn and to upskill for that next step. The fourth, and probably slightly more difficult, is being open and actually being yourself when even you feel that the environment isn't right. But for me, it also links to broader development. I've been lucky to be part of the Civil Service Senior Leaders Scheme programme and the Ford Institute programme for responsible leadership. I've been coached and I've been mentored. And for me, it's been learning about who I am can always be improved and can always be developed and learn new things. And for me, it's very much an ongoing process. But despite all of these things, we know that when you are different and when you strive to be yourself, resilience is really, really important, because obviously not everyone appreciates you, sadly, for who you are. And one of my stories is that I was 16 at the time. I just finished my GCSEs and I was in a supermarket queue. And some lout literally started swearing at my father and I and telling me that I wasn't British enough, really. And you already know about my first year architecture tutor. I've actually been threatened by a former boss, and I've really lost count of the number of times that I've been told that I'm too young, which is kind of flattering at the age of 44. But soon I'm sure that will turn to be, oh, you're too old. I've been told I'm too female, and I've even been propositioned. And all that has actually made me much more convinced that I need to stand for what I believe in and be myself, rather than be a profile of somebody, something that somebody else wants me to be. And usually what I deal with the propositioning bit is I either threaten to pour a hot drink on them, I tell them that I'm learning to box, or see that I like snakes, all of which is completely true, by the way. But it's important to understand that it's okay for it to hurt. It's okay to be angry. And then when we need to be sometimes a bit elephant-like and even develop a bit of selective hearing if we're going to be ourselves all the time. However, just a year ago, I was standing outside a conference called the London Real Estate Forum, just outside Berkeley Square, and I was about to do a moderator slot. And a consultant who was working for the company that I was with, I was in my sabbatical in the private sector, came up to a friend of mine and myself and called us the birds. So I wrote to him afterwards. I was so furious. And I wrote this as part of my letter to him. A bird is a small, fragile thing. It chirrups, it flutters, and it nests. It definitely does not chair board meetings, run multilateral companies, or govern nations. So it's little surprise that a new survey shows bird topping the list of pet names that British women would like banned from everyday use. I did also remind him that as a consultant, where his paycheck was coming from, sometimes you do really need to call it out for what it is. And for me, I've always stuck to three things I've also been really passionate about. So this is about being strategic about the career in terms of being true to yourself. So it's been really the three Ps, but for me, those three Ps are politics, property, and place. And my roles have always been a mix of the three. And I haven't been tempted to take a role just for grade because it will give me that extra rung, but it always has got to be something that I'm passionate about. So I've gone from the late 90s being convinced that I wanted to design these exquisite architectural objects to master planning big cities between 2005 and 2011, and finally becoming a civil servant. And I've been involved in the health estate, labs, mortuaries, even nuclear bunkers. And then I've gone into being a property developer and investor, and then have come back to the civil service. I've had Saudi princes change their minds at 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning about wanting to change the location of a horse racing track and the airport, bearing in mind that one bit had mountains on it and the other bit didn't. I've also had the pleasure of being in a room of angry Russians whilst trying to get planning approval. A bit like some of the people we work with, really. And talking about them, alongside my day job before joining the civil service, I've also been worked with prospective candidates for Mayor of London, government ministers and Secretary of States. And it's always helped me get that other perspective on politics that's important in our role as civil servants. And politics brings me to one of the more profound experiences of my career. The first was when I referred to swimming in a flood, and that was in January 2011. And the second was when I briefly referred to earlier, which was the 14th of June 2017. For me, it was very much a normal morning, or at least that's how it seemed on the surface. My husband came in, who you saw briefly earlier, and actually just mentioned one word to me, and that was Grenfell. And I didn't know that 72 hours later, those incredibly tragic events would very much take over my life. And I did pretty much nothing else for every waking hour, every day of the week. And it very much changed my outlook on what leadership meant to me and how it's impacted me. Grenfell changed my perceptions. And after Grenfell, I stopped the programs that I was working in for about 2 to 3 months and went to Cobra meetings. For me, Grenfell was really important in terms of being true to ourselves. It showed me the impact of the decisions that we make and how important it is to follow your gut, believe in what's right, to lead from the front and use your knowledge to change things. So for me, that part in my career was also a wayfinding point that I knew that it was time to look for my next move and to look at where I wanted to go afterwards. So it's back to those twisty, meandering paths that I talked about at the beginning. And of course, there's quite a lot of people who can mention it much more eloquently than me. And this brings me back to a favourite poem of mine. And I drew support from it for the first time when I was 18. And I failed to get into my first choice university, which was Cambridge at the time. And it made an appearance as one of our wedding readings. And then I dusted it down again over 20 years later when I worked around the clock on Grenfell. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you've given your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be yourself. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Sherin, for that. What a wonderful way to close our final presentation and indeed invite questions. So not quite at the end, but what a wonderful and powerful way to end with that. If we can do those things, if we can be all that we have been created to be, if we can carry all of ourselves and have that presence in mind, to carry that with us as we exchange. What a wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Sherin. Thank you so much for that. I didn't know what I was expecting. I was busy paying attention to all other parts of the day. So I knew I was looking forward to the final session. I knew I would enjoy it, but I wasn't expecting that. So thank you. Thank you so much. And well managed, by the way. All of the at one point, the kind of cacophony. Are you in your kitchen?
I am in my kitchen. It's the best Wi-Fi location in the house.
There you go. The wonderful, the cacophony of noise at one point. And you had the present, you went on mute, you came off mute, you asked permission, you apologized, I think 11 times, let alone once. It was wonderful. What's your son's name?
So Ren. I'm not sure he's necessarily enjoyed his cameo, but there we go.
There we go. There we go. Thank you so much for all of that. Let's have a look. Let's flip to our questions. We've got 8 listed here. One of the early questions, I think, was which book did you quote?
It's from a, so the first one I think is from reading Lolita in Tehran, and then the second one is, I can send you the link to it, but it's from the same person who wrote Persepolis, but they've got a new book out about their biography, and it's from there.
Good. Well, if you could, whether you have chance to do it via the chat now or in an email later, I certainly would welcome that personally. It's come as a question from someone on the chat. We got a couple of thumbs up against this question, Sherin. Let's go for it. Can you tell someone off for using sexist, homophobic, racist language, even if they don't know they're doing it?
Oh yeah, totally. Absolutely. I've called up people who have been using inappropriate words. They might not intend it, but that doesn't mean that you don't call it out. I mean, you might change the manner in which you call it out and the tone that you use, but still, ignorance is no excuse. Love it.
Sherin, I think you and I were separated at birth. I think there's not a sheet of paper between us. I would echo everything you've just said. I've kind of coined a couple of phrases that I tend to use. You can be unwitting, you can be unintended, but only the once. If someone around you is brave enough, kind enough to point it out to you, and then you do it again, we're into different territory then. But I love what you say about the tone, the tenor, you know, even the unforgiving heart. I think most of us as human beings can find it in ourselves to forgive, but when it's repeated and it's repeated deliberately, then it begins to enter into a different territory. So in answer to your question, colleague, Sherin says, and I totally agree, that you can point it out to people, even if they don't intend it. 9, no worries, Sherin. We are all embracing working from home, kids, cats, dogs, partners. Just another cuddle for you there, Sherin, to say you're in good company. It's happening to us all. This one says, a colleague says, Sherin, this reminded me of when I arrived in England and could only say, I do not speak English, sorry, and I would like an ice cream, please. So that's the things we learn first.
Superb, at least you got ice cream.
Ice cream, exactly. It's all okay. Stay calm and eat ice cream. It's all good. Let's see. The newest are what's on my screen, and I think the ones that we've responded to either in the course of our conversation or with me asking you explicitly, we've picked up. So I think we're all good. I think, unless there are any more coming through, Sherin, I think in good time for our delegates who have probably had one way or another, whether it be technical or ergonomic or other ways of interrupting the flow, they've had more than enough. I love the sharing at the end there. It was Kipling, wasn't it? Rudyard Kipling and If. Rudyard Kipling, who I think is down as being born in Mumbai and passing away in Brighton, I think it was. But if memory serves, that's what's in my head anyway for those quiz nights. I may be wrong about that, but certainly born, I think, in Mumbai. We've got, oh, you've kindly slipped that quote in, and the Goodreads, wonderful website, Goodreads. Thank you for that, Sherin. Are there any more on? No, nothing more coming through by way of questions. I look back at the Glisser. Really inspiring talk, Sherin. Thank you so much, is a comment on there. Being yourself, how can we be authentic and not brutal? I'm going to throw that back to you, Sherin. We've got a bit of time. someone's striking distinction. I don't know whether they're correlating authenticity with brutality for some other reason. But anyway, they want to know, how can you be authentic and not brutal? What's your response?
It's a really interesting point, and I'm intrigued how the two are, unless I suppose you're a very in-your-face kind of person.
Yeah.
I think if you are authentic, most people will probably not see you as brutal. But I suppose there's a boundary, isn't there, that you can be yourself, but as long as you're not infringing on the rights of others,
yeah,
and allowing them to be themselves. So if your personality is, you know, and I'm fairly sort of out there kind of person, but if you're so much of an extrovert, I probably prefer that rather than brutal. If you're so much an extrovert that you might cut across people a lot of time and be really keen to say, I think it's not about not being yourself, but it's about being mindful of others and your impact. So sometimes you just dial up and dial down.
Yeah.
So you allow those people to bring their whole selves to the conversations and not feel overwhelmed by your personality.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. Sherin, I could listen to you all day. I'm glad that we got to spend this time together. Thank you for sharing all of that. I'll have one more glance at the questions just in case there's anything more. Really inspiring talk. Again, a ditto on that comment. Oh, here's a nice little tickle to end, Sherin, if you're up for it. How has being from a different cultural background helped you in your career?
I think I've actually always enjoyed being different. So whilst I always think it's nice to have other people like me in the room from similar backgrounds, but I've very, very rarely had that luxury. I think, as I said earlier, I think it actually helps in career-wise being different, because people remember you and hopefully remember you for the right reasons. Yeah. But I've been also very lucky in that I've been given the confidence by my parents and by my sort of extended social circle, and that it's okay. I haven't felt that I have had to hide that. But it also means you've got a broader range of experiences to draw from. And I find that actually the majority of people are really open and welcoming to that. Initially, they might find it a bit strange, but actually most people really want to learn and like understanding about things that are different from their own experience. So I've been lucky that in the majority of times I found it quite a positive experience, and find that hopefully it enriches the relationships that I have, that I can see things from a slightly different point of view than if I had been purely Anglo-Saxon and born here. But what is purely Anglo-Saxon these days anyway?
Exactly. We're all coming to terms and appreciating all of that richness. Sherin, thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for that lively presentation, authentic, and bringing all of yourself into this space, this Zoom meeting, and all of those that you are now taking care of. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you for having me.
All the best with the career ahead of you, and all the best with all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.